afternoon. In case you're wondering, I'm Kevin McGrane. I'm priest in charge of Trinity Parish in St. James, Missouri, and I'm chair of the Creation Care Commission. I want to thank you all for joining me today, those of you who intended to and those who did not intend to do that. I actually was going to say, my next line was going to say, this is a workshop for creation care, so if you're looking for another workshop, you're on the wrong Zoom. I think we'll skip that part. Let me explain the theme of this workshop and what it will cover. For we have to cover a lot, and I thought about 60 minutes, it's now like about 50. So we'll just start. According to Creation Care website on our national church website, creation care is separated into 3 pillars. And those pillars are formation, conservation, and advocacy. It's our intention to explore each one of these pillars of creation care tonight, along with concrete examples of how our diocese is actually promoting them with real activities. So we know that the shortest distance between 2 points or between 2 people is a story. And we're going to hear stories from members of our diocese in this workshop through a series of short interviews. We'll hear from people in Missouri who are actually practicing formation, conservation, and advocacy right here where they live, and how we can learn from them and might move forward in our own context. So if you have any questions on our interviewees, please just jot them down in the chat. And Tracy, who's helping me this afternoon, will have the opportunity to go ahead and address them as time goes by. So let's just go ahead and start. Relative to formation, Scripture is clear that divine mercy is over all of God's creation. The natural world is not something to be simply regarded as a resource, that it's unimportant to God. No, but instead we need to search for the big themes and the evolving stories of our relationship to creation, exploring deeper and more spiritually the aspects of our relationship with God's world. To that end, we should engage in practices that enhance our understanding of this relationship and consider what we can do to enhance it besides bringing it to our prayer and bringing it to our liturgy. So we have with us tonight 3 people who are actively participating in practices of formation relative to creation care. They are Ms. Leslie McIntyre of the Church of Good Shepherd, the Reverend Mary Haggerty, priest in charge of St. Barnabas Parish, and the Reverend Michaeline Miller, director of Deaconess Ann House here in St. Louis. We'll hear from each one of them individually, relating their stories about what they're doing in context of their lives relative to formation. So let's start with Ms. Leslie McIntyre. She's developing a unique outreach program that should be of interest to many people of our diocese. Leslie, are you here?
I am here.
Yes. Good evening. Thank you very much for being here. So you're doing something that's kind of interesting and unusual. So what is it that you happen to be doing?
Well, what I'm proposing we start is a movie club. I know a lot of you are probably part of a book club. Some of you may be part of a movie club, but this will be a movie club around the theme of creation care. And you put it really well, Kevin, when you said searching for big themes and evolving stories. Movies are great ways to do that. And so hopefully by watching some films, we may encounter places we've never been to, experiences that we maybe have had, but maybe never will have. And we can use these as a way to explore and gain a deeper connection with God's creation. We can witness how others have interacted with creation in meaningful ways, and perhaps from all of this, find ways that we can motivate ourselves to get out and encounter God's creation in new ways as well.
That's dynamite. So exactly how does this club work?
Well, the second thing that I wanted, but before I explain the details,
Okay.
Another thing I think that it will do is provide a wonderful venue for those of us from all over the diocese to get together and share insights. We don't often get a chance to do that short of convention every year. And so my hope is that we can really share our varied experiences and understandings of these films. So how it's going to work is I will select a film for us to watch. It will be posted on the diocesan website about 2 weeks in advance of the discussion date. People would watch the film on one of the streaming services. I'm trying to stick pretty much to Netflix and Amazon Prime, because I think those are streaming services that most people have. But many of the films are also available in local libraries. So that's another way that you can get hold of the film. Once you've watched the film, you can go to the diocesan website. You click on the Connect and Events column. It will show the film and will ask you to pre-register. Just so I have a number, I want to keep our discussions in manageable groups, and I need to know if we need to have breakout rooms or whatever. So please pre-register. You will then receive a link and can watch the film on the designated night. We're going to launch this on December 1st. It's a Wednesday night at 7 p.m. And we're going to watch the film, The Biggest Little Farm, which is a delightful movie that follows two dreamers who leave a tiny little apartment in LA and go and start a farm in the countryside outside LA, about a 200-acre farm, and they want to have it develop completely in coexistence with nature. And you see all their adventures along the way. It's available for free from Hulu, but it's available from Amazon for $3.99. And it is, I've checked a number of local libraries, and it is available there as well. So that will be our debut film. And after that, we'll plan to have a film about once a month, usually the last Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. And then in addition, afterwards, about a week after the film has aired, if you wanted to use the film and the materials for a discussion within your parish or another group that you're part of, a lesson plan will be posted online as well, so that you can use it hopefully in other contexts, because I'm hoping that the films are going to be very diverse. Many will be documentaries, but not all of them. We may even see an animated film or two along the way. And hopefully we'll get to a nice group together to have some great discussions and enhance our appreciation of God's creation.
That's awesome, Leslie. Thank you so much. This is great. So, stay tuned and be on our websites and make certain that you sign up starting on December the 1st. Thank you much.
You can sign up ahead of time. You can sign up now. It's up there. The link is active.
Oh, great.
And,
okay.
And as soon as you sign up, you'll get a Zoom link.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next is our Reverend Mary Haggerty of St. Barnabas, a parish that just wrapped up its first year running a Good News Garden. Mary, are you there by any chance?
I'm here.
Yay, there you are. How are you?
I am good.
So you've actually started a garden, a Good News Garden over at St. Barney. So what motivated you to start a garden over there?
Well, it actually started, the thought for it was planted at my ordination. I was ordained in the middle of COVID. We could not gather inside, and a few of us were able to gather for my ordination and have a little reception in the garden. And at that reception, we looked out and there's this huge, beautiful plot of land. And Kevin was there. You remember this, Kevin?
Yes, I do.
Just this land just lying dormant. And several of us said, ooh, I wonder what we could do with that. And I also, the reason that it was very fitting is because I came into a parish that said to me when they called me, we want to revitalize. We've gotten very small. We're worried about our future and we want to try new things. So this was a way to do something outside of the walls of the church in the middle of COVID that, helped us to connect with creation and God and one another in a new way.
Wow. So what have you learned now that you've just wrapped up your first year of Good News Garden?
A lot. The first thing I would say is I've learned that it takes a village to grow a garden. We actually are this is a collaboration, the garden. The official name is the North County Episcopal Communal Garden. That's a mouthful, but it says exactly what it is. All Saints and Ascension in Northwoods. And St. Stephen's in Ferguson and St. Barnabas are all together in this project. It's housed at our property because we have that vacant, plot, but we're all working together. So it really has taken all of us coming together from different places with my back. Okay, different places. So it took, and we have a lot. Bill, how many volunteers do we have? About 15 volunteers who do the actual work in the garden. The other thing I learned, one other thing is start small and grow slowly. At the end of this year, we had a good year. We got 203 pounds of produce. It's small compared to others, but it was our first year. So we started small. And one of our members who's very great at gardening and enthusiastic was like, we could add this, we could do that. And we all went, whoa, wait a minute. No, we're going to add one bed. And then the last thing I will say is partnership. I learned a lot about partnership, and that was one of the reasons that this garden was created anyway. We got a grant from Gateway Greening that's now called Seed St. Louis, and that was fantastic if anybody's thinking of working with them, because the grant itself, it's not up here stuff. It's very practical steps to getting you to exactly what you're going to do with your garden. We also partnered with the high school across the street, and we had some help from some of the kids, talk to the teachers. The principal was on board. I'm hoping that can flourish as well down the road.
That's dynamite. So how's it formed St. Barney spiritually while growing this thing?
I think it has expanded our notion of God and spirituality. It's taken us out of how we always do things and given us another way to pray and another way to be together, spiritually speaking. I think there's really been something, it's sort of like we're all children in the garden, like, oh my gosh, the carrots, look at them, they're popping up. I mean, it's exciting. There's just something very joyful about it. Specifically to spirituality, one of the things that we got with our grant was a couple of wooden benches. And then we had a donation of a picnic table, the old-fashioned wooden kind. So every Wednesday in the summer, I offered Eucharist at the picnic table in the garden.
How cool.
Absolutely. A very small group. I mean, when you do something new, you all know, sometimes you have one or two people and you think, is this thing going to work? But by the end, we had a good group. We had a woman who came all the way from Webster Groves a few times. And it was just a different way to be celebrating Eucharist outdoors, right in the middle of creation.
Wow, that's awesome. What a great story. Thank you. That's great for sharing it. Maybe you're going to hear then from our next colleague in this presentation, because she's under a different context, and that's the Reverend Michaeline Miller. She's the director of Deaconess Ann House there in the city. Deaconess Ann House is also beginning to develop a garden center, but it's in a very dense urban environment, and it's not on a parish grounds. Michaeline, are you there by any chance?
I'm here. Yeah. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Good afternoon. How are you?
Hi there. I'm doing well. Yeah.
Good. So Deaconess Ann is an urban environment, and you're a service community. You're not a parish with the Episcopal Service Corps. What motivated you to create your garden?
Great. I'm so glad I went after Mary, because I also got just so excited. I have the spirit's boiling in my tummy right now. But a lot of it was similar, just listening, lots of listening. So we're just at the very beginning. So I also hear Mary's note, go slow. But we're just at the beginning, just starting to organize things and make moves to work with the long green yard that's right next to Deaconess Ann House. So if you've ever been over there, there's this green, skinny, long lot that when I first became the director, I had a neighbor across the street ask me ooh, can you mow that? Can you mow your yard? And I was like, oh, that's not our yard. I'm sorry, but I'll call the city to come get it. And it's actually a yard that's owned by Paul McKee and the North Side Regeneration Project, and a lot of properties owned in that space are kind of left vacant, left fallow, left to grow. And so when I got there as the director, it was maybe about 5-6 feet tall of just weeds, and it's an eyesore. And so I heard this neighbor hurt, by this green space. And one of Deaconess Sandhouse's mission is to go in to this neighborhood, not to fix anything, but to join the movement of God, the movement of the Spirit, the movement of Jesus already happening in that space. And so listening to neighbors, I heard that ask. Other neighbors have said similar things. And so to be a good neighbor, to be responding to this, this need that's there, lots of thoughts are percolating. And again, Deaconess Sandhouse has also been worshiping out in our backyard a whole lot. On the last Mondays, we've had guests still join us for the Eucharist on our Monday night worship. And we've been meeting in the backyard. And so we've been seeing this lot, seeing it through the seasons grow tall, not be accessible to neighbors as a space. So to answer that first question, what brought it about was just an opportunity and listening to something that could happen there. So,
what are the challenges you've discovered relative to your location and the fact that you're not a parish? I mean, it's not like you can call on 75 people.
Right. And I have a very transitory population. So the young adults at Deaconess Sandhouse are there for a year, and they arrive in August and leave us in July, usually. So yes, so having a very transient congregation year to year, I think a challenge is maintaining the effort to do things. And so right now we're also going pretty slow, gaining traction. I have to reach out to Northside Regeneration, get them to move on things, and they have agreed to rent out the property. And then I have to turn over to the diocese and ask them all these questions too, to make sure we have permission to make moves on things. But the biggest thing, again, as I was kind of saying, is we want to talk to neighbors first and kind of get consensus and always ask before we act.
Sure.
And so right now I'm talking with the core members. We're talking about how to have conversation with neighbors and community members, to then go out and ask the neighbors, next to the property, and also some community stakeholders of what, this is maybe our idea for something, but what do they need as well? There's a lot of pocket parks in Old North, and a couple of really beautiful green spaces. It is a neighborhood that really values its green space, knowing that there's not a whole lot sometimes in urban areas. There can be a disconnection between the natural environment.
Sure.
City blocks. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you were hoping it to be like a spiritual gathering place as well as a garden. Could you expand a little bit about that?
Yeah. I've heard from previous directors of Deaconess Sandhouse when it was kind of growing, there were little hopes and dreams and things that never, came to be as things were going through and cycling through. But there was one director that had a dream of building a chapel in that space, which is just really neat. And so I heard that, and that was kind of percolating. But then just seeing neighbors not being able to access things and walking around the neighborhood and seeing these pocket parks, these ideas kind of started blending together of having a place to grow some things. To also, if you know about Deaconess Sandhouse and been there, you would have seen the little free pantry that sits outside. Yes. I think came about under Rebecca Ragland, who's on this call, under this directorship. And that has become such a vital component in the neighborhood. We just had a little free pantry event today where we also got out coats and chili in the neighborhood, and people leave stuff in that little free pantry and people take things that they need out of that little free pantry. And so to think about a garden bed or something to be able to get veggies and things there, but also help the core members as well be able to live into a relationship with creation during their time in an urban area like St. Louis.
Sure.
And then also provide neighbors. When I'm over at Deaconess Sandhouse, I see neighbors walking and they stop at the little free pantry too. And they keep walking. And so just imagining, like, if there's a bench there or a place to sit and rest and meditate, there's like half the lot's in shade, half is in sun. So it kind of becomes a well-blended space, maybe. So we're still at the very dreaming beginning phases of all this. But it's possible. And I want to, there's a lot of local artists in Old North as well. So part of my hope would be to have a local artist kind of create some art that really makes the direct connection between, like, a mural. There's lots of murals in Old North, but that makes a connection between creation and God as creator. And
Sure.
so if that would be a mural of creation, the creation story or something like that. So not just a place to sit and meditate or rest, like a bench. There's quite a few benches in the area, but one that also like has a piece of art that redirects them to God and nature. And I'll share, if I'm not taking up too much time, Kevin, I'll share a quote. This is from Hildegard, Saint Hildegard, who's actually the patron saint of gardeners, amongst other things. She did so much during her lifetime, but she has a quote where she says, and this is from the Middle Ages, "We shall awaken from our dullness and rise vigorously toward justice. If we fall in love with creation deeper and deeper, we will respond to its endangerment with passion."
Cool.
So that's coming from the Middle Ages. I think we're still being called to awaken and to fall in love with nature. And so to have a place to do that in the city center, maybe, or
Truth
another
is truth.
place.
Truth is truth, no matter the age. I love it. Thank you very much for sharing that. That's great. I really appreciate it. Our next pillar that we're going to talk about is conservation. And I'm married to a conservation biologist, by the way. And I hear a lot that the definition of conservation always contains within it some version of the term wise use. But in creation care, activists in creation care ministry have employed two approaches to the concept of conservation, which is mitigation and adaptation. Two of our interviewees today, the Reverend Rebecca Ragland and the Reverend Dr. Maria L. Evans, will actually talk about how they're addressing the challenges of conservation. Under mitigation, we can care for God's creation by eliminating pollution, conserving energy, like going with wind and solar, and just trying to avoid the fossil fuel industry. One of our parishes, St. Paul's in Carondelet, is mitigating the impact of fossil fuels by going solar. And what I want to talk a bit about this is Rebecca Ragland, the pastor of St. Paul's in Carondelet. Rebecca, are you out there by any chance?
I am here.
Oh, there you are. Hello, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Yay.
Good to see you.
So you're the pastor of St. Paul's in Carondelet, and you've gone solar. You've gotten solar panels in your roof.
Yes.
What's going on over there? Tell us about going solar.
Well, we started the process of going solar about probably a year ago. I'm not to be precise, but it took a while before we actually had the installation of the solar panels. I think with COVID and all the other things, there were delays, as we're all hearing about. So we had the installation of the panels in August, early August, and they have been already, we have had one energy cycle. September, we didn't pay anything for September. So
wow.
That was happy news for us.
So it's starting to pay itself off right off the bat.
It is.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So was the transition, the physical transition, very disturbing to parish life there?
It was completely not disturbing. It was a very simple, straightforward process. Our vestry was all, we had consensus about the installation of solar. We had a bequest that was specifically said that this was a part of the values of the bequest, was to move into creation care more deeply. So there really weren't any roadblocks. The biggest roadblock was discerning what company to go with. Mm-hmm. And that took a minute, but we were really pleased with our provider and were able to get a rebate both from Ameren and a little discount from the company that we went with, and as an effort on their part to be more competitive. And so it worked out really well. We went with a company from Springfield, actually, and they were really great.
Yeah, so this has been a pretty successful transition for you over at St. Paul's.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what's been the effect upon the attitude of the congregation relative to their going solar and creation care?
Yeah, so there were already commitments on the part of the congregation, a lot of desire for us to be more faithful to an ethic of creation care. And we've certainly done some other things toward that, but this was our most significant really investment in this. And so there's a lot of joy and happiness. Certainly pragmatically, it's great to not have to pay an electrical bill. I mean, that's fantastic. But there's also the benefit both of when you do this, if someone does it at their church, you want to be sure that the word gets out. And so we put a banner up with photographs of our solar panels, because you can't see them. They're on the roof, so there's nothing to see. But with the banner, we've actually seen really significant commentary on how other people are happy about it besides us. And one of our ministries is we have an outside outlet that a lot of people who are not able to get access to electricity otherwise charge their phone. And so there's really to us, it's really a wraparound, that it's not only, it's definitely in our interest, we don't have to pay electricity. It's this beautiful mitigation that we are moving away from using fossil fuels for electricity. And then it's also that we are able then to more effectively or economically care for people around us.
Wow.
And then there's been this surprise second thing that's happened to us, which is, in the process of this, I was a part of a conversation about environmental justice, and was subsequently tapped for us to put in a air quality monitor on the church.
Wow.
So now we're one of 15 churches that's along the Mississippi corridor that are going to have this equipment installed, which will help to see about particulate matter in the community and monitor that. And in addition, we're going to have a QR code sign on our front lawn and do a neighborhood meeting to help people learn about how they can engage and give feedback about when they smell something weird and off in the neighborhood. When did they get an asthma diagnosis? All those things. So that all this information will go to UMSL, and they will be able to track air quality in impoverished neighborhoods. So
wow,
that is the next segue that came as a result of our solar panels. So you just don't know how that's all gonna pan out, and it's very exciting. It's been
wow,
really
that's incredible. That's incredible. What an icon you are to the community. To be able to go ahead and do something like that, and just continues to roll out and creates awareness. So that's just awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Really appreciate it. That's what a great way to do conservation. Yeah. So next is the Reverend Dr. Maria Evans, who is interim priest over at Trinity in Hannibal. And she is a long-term rural resident of Northeast Missouri, and she lives in her own homestead up there. And she would like to educate us on the topic of pollinators. So Maria, are you there by any chance?
I'm right here. So
hey, there you are. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Awesome. So pollinators is a really big buzzword in creation care and climate care today. What are pollinators and why are they important?
Okay. Well, I'll start off by just saying, we're kind of covering both ends of mitigation here. Rebecca has put the giant grand picture of solar panels, and I'm going to talk about something that anybody can do for $2 and the eye to find a spot to put the seeds. Pollinators are a large category that encompasses both insects that directly pollinate and other animals that may host the insects, for instance, ticks riding on the back of your dogs or something like that. And what has happened in the last 50 to 70 years is, with the increase of pesticide and herbicide use and modern farming methods, it used to be everybody's farm had a little bit of waste area on the sides of the farm where there was growing some different weeds, some milkweed, some other weeds, and that has disappeared. Estimates are that we may be running on 20% of the pollinator species that compared to 100 years ago. And what is nice about attracting pollinators is anyone can do it in any size of space. You don't have to do like I'm doing, where I'm trying to eventually put 5 acres of my property entirely as pollinator space. if you have a corner of your yard or a waste area or right next to the house, you can plant particularly native plants that are going to be pollinators in your area. So there are lots of websites you can look to see what native species are. The Missouri Department of Conservation is a huge resource. Also, if you want something bigger like bushes or trees, you can order seedlings from Missouri Department of Conservation. They're very, very cheap. They're also very, very small, but that's okay. They grow. If any reputable seed company will have like the flower seeds available. I like to use, and this is not an endorsement, it's just I like to use them. I like to use an outfit in Jeff City called Missouri Wildflowers Nursery, because they guarantee that their seed is genetically consistent with Missouri species. So these are actual native Missouri species, not some imported species. And it's basically simple. You read a little bit about the kinds of plants in your area that attract bees, butterflies, insects, and you go out and plant them. And it can be, you know, just like a little waste area in your yard, or it can be a little spot next to the house. I have a pollinator spot right next to my vegetable garden, which, you know, helps my vegetable garden. So it's a commensal relationship. Most of the species, you know, milkweed is very, very inexpensive. Verbena is another native species that's very, very inexpensive. You know, there are a whole host of them. I don't want to waste my time on that, but just the idea that you can walk around your parish grounds and go, well, look, there's this space of yard where really nothing's going on. We could plant some pollinators there. It's something we've tried to incorporate in each of the parishes I've served as an interim. Some were already on the bandwagon with that. I mean, I sort of got the idea when I was interim at Good Shepherd. So they were long involved with that. So my main message is simply to encourage you to read up a little bit about the native plants in your area, and look at their flowering seasons. You know, do they plant early in the spring, middle of the summer? Do they flower late in the summer? Get a mixture of all three, plant the space and watch what shows up. A lot of people will find, you know, you plant some milkweed, you're going to have monarch butterflies and caterpillars. And, you know, the monarch population's taking a beating right now. You'll find that it also attracts hummingbirds. And you don't need to put out sugar water for the hummingbirds because you have a natural source of sustenance for them. So it's cheap, it's easy, anyone can do it. That's my message.
And you can go ahead and find a lot of these pollinators and like relatively cheaply or native to Missouri by going to the Missouri Department of Conservation's website and finding out a lot of information there.
We have
That's
one
awesome.
raised hand from Glenda Barber, Trinity St. James.
Okay. Glenda, are you there?
Okay. Would you repeat the Jefferson City place?
It's Missouri Wildflowers Nursery. Let me just jump in. I actually figured some people might want some links. So I actually pulled that one up and I will post it in the chat here in a second.
Okay. All right, thank you.
There it is.
And I'll also post the link for ordering Conservation Department seedlings.
Awesome. Thank you, Maria. That's awesome.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I knew that when it comes to pollinators, if I was asking somebody from your background, which you had a rural background there, you'd be the one to know. So I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Thanks for sharing this with us. Appreciate it very much. on to the third and final pillar, which is advocacy. And faith leaders, both lay and ordained, have the power to engage congregations. One of the things I was learning from Whitney is that a lot of us within the faith community, both lay and ordained, have the power to convene. And we can bear witness to the effects of climate change and the need to just solutions with our governments. So we encourage actions and help prepare communities for climate impacts. You know, it's as the saying goes, if not us, who? If not now, when? So to that end, we have two people to address the issues of advocacy here. And I would like to introduce Mr. Parker Williams, Holy Cross and Poplar Bluff. Parker's just recently returned from Scotland, where he was an official observer for COP26. Our other person is myself, who is the main contact for CCM's recent membership with Interfaith Power and Light, which we'll talk about in a second. But first, I really want to go ahead and make certain we have the opportunity to listen to Parker. Parker, are you there by any chance?
I'm here. How are you?
Oh, there he is. Good. Thank you very much. You're back from Glasgow. Really appreciate it.
Still jet lagged a bit, but I'm here.
Oh, that's okay. Cool. We'll fix that for you. We'll even make you even more tired. So you attended COP26 in Glasgow. If you could, just a thumbnail sketch of exactly what is COP26 and what was your role there?
Yep. So the UN Federation Conference on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, this is their Convention of the Parties, COP. So this is the 26th meeting of the Convention of the Parties, which they've got all these other acronyms and stuff. But basically, this is the main utility for all the nations of the world to come together and decide and discuss the directions we're going to affect climate change and what we're going to agree to. So the Paris Agreement came out of COP in 2015. And so this was the last, the big one since Paris, to where each country's nationally determined commitments, or what they're committing to voluntarily do, were laid out and discussed. And so I came with what's called the Christian Climate Observers Program, which is a number of different Christian climate groups that came together to form this group to train up the next generation of climate activists and advocates, and then sponsor us with their NGO status. So we got the observer badge from these organizations to go in and participate in that. So an observer is something that has a lot of UN history. So basically, these are non-party stakeholders, is the way the UN determines it. So instead of being a representative of a country, I was there representing, in this case, the World Evangelical Alliance, who I was wearing the badge for, and the Diocese of Missouri. And so as an observer, we were supposed to be granted access to most of those areas to keep up with what's going on, because we have something at stake too.
Sure. Okay. So what was your impressions of the conference, and what major lessons did you take away from it?
First, frustration. Frustration that moved into hope. But first, frustration. I now see why so many areas of the world have given up on the process. Why Greta Thunberg, who's so famously advocated in this area, has said COP26 was a failure. Mainly because it was one of the most exclusive COPs yet, even though there were 40,000 people attending with a badge. And so I was there at the first week. You're only granted one of the 2 weeks as an observer, and they were still working out a bunch of stuff, but we weren't allowed access to a lot of the rooms and negotiations that we should have been allowed access to. And so the scheduling was chaos. But even more than that, some of the parties, especially some of the island states, weren't being allowed in rooms that they're supposed to have been, through confusion, some other stuff. So it was a lot of frustration, as well as when we started getting into the conference and seeing where most of the conversations were and how they'd been structured, it had moved from mitigation to adaptation. So mitigation meaning, what things can we do as countries to stop climate change, to keep it below the 1.5 C that we've talked about so much. And instead it's moved to, okay, how do we adapt to what's coming? Because we see now that we're not going to be able to stop it the way that we hope to. We can adapt and still do some mitigation, but it's shifting there. So, well, we saw a lot of activity from big fossil fuel. So they were actively undermining a lot of the efforts, especially in week 2. To keep things the way they are. I actually had dinner with, didn't find out till a little bit later, they were executives with a Chilean oil and gas company. And their strategy, they are claiming to go net zero by going in and using their profits to buy up some of these green energy companies so that they can say they're net zero when they're actually increasing oil production and use at the same time. So that's why I say there was a lot of frustration. But also through that, my hopes shifted a little bit from hoping to see the nations of the world and our big leaders really do something that could affect change, and seeing that that's not where our hope is best laid. So seeing the faith communities, the interfaith communities come together and push for a lot of this stuff. And then even we had a meeting the first day we were there with Al Gore, and he kind of shifted our perspective in that a little bit. In that conversation, he said all the great moral movements of the past, the one thing they had in common were elements of despair. They went to despair first. But when the arguments were cleared away, the central issue was moral and spiritual. And he talked about a Christian teacher who had that would say, we all repeatedly face the choice between the hard right, and the easy wrong. And he said, I think that's really what this is. You as a Christian climate activist have the authority and the opportunity to define the issue in those terms. And so what he was saying is that we as Christians have a responsibility to prophetically speak to power and say that this is a moral issue. It's not just a climate issue, it's a justice issue, because the poorest countries who have contributed the least to climate change are affecting the most, or are getting the most dramatic effects of it. They're taking the brunt of it, whereas we're a little bit insulated. And so, yeah, moving to hope and seeing how much that we have come together in that. And then even looking at Revelation, the book of Revelation, right? The nations raged, and yet still the church came together and became this hope as God continues to redeem all of creation. So it kind of shifted for me a little bit. Yeah.
And it's so interesting how so many issues relative to climate issues and creation care have a class component, and it has a racial component, particularly in our nation.
Absolutely.
Where a significant, chances are real good they're not going to put a landfill in a rich neighborhood, but they are going to put it right next to a poor neighborhood. And the folks are going to be the ones going to have to bear the brunt of it. So how might people be able to advocate for programs and policies created by COP26?
Yeah, in that, I want to speak to two groups of people, because we really have two kinds of communities around this conversation. The first is those who, if you find yourself in communities that are very dismissive of climate change, like myself, in our community, it's a very politically charged conversation. So the number one thing you can do is talk about it. The number one thing you can do is talk about it. The single most important thing you can do, I'm a big fan of solar, right? And of limiting food waste and recycling and light bulbs and all that stuff. But that is not going to affect the change that we need to see, right? The biggest thing we can do is to talk about climate change within our spheres of influence. And then secondly, and I'll talk a little bit about more just a second, but secondly, for those communities that are in spaces where you acknowledge the problem and want to do something about it, there are a lot of things like divestment. Ensure that your investments, you're divested from fossil fuel companies, as I'll mention again here in a second. You can cut your food waste, consume less, get solar panels, as we've all heard, drive electric. All these things are wonderful. But our community garden isn't going to solve the problem, right? Like individual actions are not going to solve the problem of climate change. And this is where it really comes to mind. Our battle isn't against flesh and blood. It's against the principalities and the powers, like I told you a little about the oil and gas companies. So a few stats on that before I really get to my main point here is since 1988, 70% of the heat trapping gases that have been produced come from 100 companies. 100 companies produce 70% of heat trapping gases, and they're all continuing to fight to continue the practices that have lined our pocketbooks, right? And I say our pocketbooks, but they're the ones that are really trying to keep that clear. So instead of using their profits to lead to a carbon-free future, they're suing them to shift blame and muddy the waters. So big fossil fuel is counting on exploiting our conscience regarding climate. So one strategy they use is to shame individuals for the system that they are fighting to protect. So for instance, in 2005, BP introduced a tool to measure our carbon footprint. So we could go in and measure how much carbon we are using. It's actually a really great tool, but it was measuring our carbon footprint, not theirs. of the way they have created the system, right? So they actively induce guilt into the public so that we'll be too busy blaming ourselves and one another to notice the richest companies in the world continue to grow their bottom line at the planet's expense. And so one book that really laid a lot of this out for me, the stats, I actually had some conversations with her while we were there, is Saving Us by Catherine Hayhoe. She's kind of become the rock star in that movement. I highly recommend it. And on that point, I just wanted to read a quote out of there. We've got a few minutes still.
Yep, we do.
It's the narrative that has both driven and obstructed the climate change conversation for the past several decades. It tells us climate change could have been fixed if we'd all just ordered less takeout, used fewer plastic bags, turned off some more lights, planted a few trees, or driven an electric car. The belief that this is an enormous existential problem could have been fixed if we had all just tweaked our consumptive habits is not only preposterous, it's dangerous. It turns environmentalism into an individual choice defined as sin or virtue, convicting those who don't or can't uphold these ethics. When people come to me and confess their green sins as if I were some sort of eco-nun, I want to tell them that they are carrying the guilt of the oil and gas industry's crimes, that the weight of our sickly planet is too much for one person to shoulder, and that the blame paves the road to apathy, which can seal our doom. So what I want to say is that plant our gardens, right? Those are incredibly, those are super helpful and have an important place. But let's also look to advocating and prophetically proclaiming to the powers that be that we have to shift away from this, right? So for instance, in Missouri, 72% of our energy in Missouri comes from coal. 80% is fossil fuels. The largest portion of that 72% is coal. So this is areas that we need to be speaking truth to power and figuring out ways that our communities can move away from this. And so for all of us that are in this world and are concerned about it, our biggest battle is going to be one of despair, right? Things are going to get worse before they get better. And yet what we see in scripture is this clear indication, this clear move towards hope, despite how bad things are getting. And that's the gift that we have to offer to the world. Our call is to proclaim the hope of Christ in a world of destruction and prophetically call for repentance of those powers. And so just one last thing, there's a quote attributed to Augustine that Catherine Hayhoe throws in there towards the end of the book. And he says, hope has two beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage. Anger are the way things are, and courage to see that they do not remain as they are, right? And so that's really our call as Christians in this space, is to move in that direction. So,
amen. Parker, thank you very much. Thanks for your time going out to Glasgow and representing us. It was great. I really appreciate that.
I mean, it was just such a terrible experience going out to Glasgow, right? So,
I appreciate it very much. Just to finish off the third pillar of advocacy, just here in the last couple of 3 minutes, CCM has joined an organization called Interfaith Power and Light. That's a faith-based lobbying organization centering on environmental and climate policy. IPL, as it's known, has chapters in 40 states. It has over 20,000 congregations in its membership, and it represents around 6.5 million people in those congregations. It's considered the largest faith-based environmental advocacy group in the United States. Don't know if that's true, but it's probably close to being true. And we do have a chapter here in Missouri, and that chapter has been in existence for 20 years. So if we want to be able to go ahead and do some real, on the ground advocacy in Jefferson City, in St. Louis County, in Springfield, in your own particular county, please know that we do have an organization that has some expertise in this area, and they actually have a staff that follows a significant number of policy initiatives going through our state government. And we can actually join with them to do some lobbying face to face with the folks who are our decision makers. Yes, they may not necessarily agree with us, but at the same time, if we're not there, somebody else is, and they're going to be making their case for things like fossil fuel, for coal, for things of that nature. So please understand that Creation Care Ministry also is a member of IPL Missouri, and we're doing some lobbying in that area. According to my clock, it's 6:27, and this is supposed to end at 6:30. And I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity for attending. If by any chance you want to keep abreast of what's going on in Creation Care Ministry, We have a regular feature in iSeek every week. You can always contact us about things that are going on. In year 2022, we're going to start to have some quarterly activities that are going to be diocesan-wide. It's really difficult to do that during the age of COVID, but we wanted to go ahead and bang the drum and do education in 2021. That was our main focus, and I think it's really helped.
Kevin, we do have one question.
Yes.
Asking if the recording will be available.
Yeah, I understand that, yes, all the recordings will be available. Exactly when that will be, I'm not quite sure, but it's probably within the next 24 to 48 hours. So I will double check and make certain and find out when that happens. And I'll post it on my own Facebook page. Anybody wants to contact me, I'm Kevin McGrane Sr. on Facebook. So you can go ahead and contact me. Or if you talk to Tracy, Tracy can shoot you straight over to me, either by email or by telephone. And was that the hand up?
We have
Yes.
another question for from Angela Breer.
Okay, go ahead, Angie.
Hi, guys. I'm so glad that we've started this work, and as early as 1996, Bishop Hayes Rockwell came back from a House of Bishops meeting very alarmed because the focus of one of their workshops or what have you was on global warming.
Mhm.
And at that time in 96, he was scared out of his wits about it. And yet here we are, and nothing's been happening. And it sort of links into racial justice, which was part of our resolutions workshop conversation. There was a lot of frustration of we talk and we talk and we talk, and it's time to do now. Talk is
Yes.
over. The time to talk is over. We've got to start doing. And so I'm really grateful that you guys are helping us, mobilize.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. And we will continue to do so, step by step, inch by inch. It's going to take a while, but it's the time for talk is over with. We need to speak with our feet, and we need to march with our feet. 6:30. I'm going to respect everybody's time. God bless. Keep the faith. Thank you all for being here. And I look forward to seeing you in 2022 and some of the things we start doing. Everybody have a good day.